Hello! If you're visiting for the first time, it's fantastic to have you here. And if you're a returning listener, welcome back. This video features mostly true scary stories with the sound of gentle rain in the background. If you're looking for something to help with sleeplessness, anxiety, or stress, you're in the right place. If you enjoy the stories, I'd be grateful if you'd subscribe. Thank you for being here. Now let's begin. Welcome to my spooky tale about a haunted night I spent in my apartment. You won't believe the scary things that happened. As you listen, remember to tell me in the comments where you're tuning in from. And guess what? I have something special just for you. If you'd like to lose weight even while you're sleeping, check out the link in the description below to learn more. Now, let's dive into this thrilling story together. I had always loved living alone in my cozy little apartment. It felt like home, but one night changed everything. It was a quiet evening, and I decided to curl up on the couch with some snacks and my favorite movie. The lights flickered as a storm rolled in outside. The wind howled through the trees, and the rain began to pound on my window. As the thunder rumbled, I only felt safe inside my little place. But things began to feel different. I noticed shadows moving in the corner of my eye. I turned my head, quickly looking to see what it was. Nothing. I shook it off, thinking it was just my imagination. I knew staying up late could play tricks on me. So, I snuggled deeper into my blanket and tried to enjoy the movie. Suddenly, I heard a loud bang. My heart raced, and I jumped up from the couch. It sounded like it had come from the kitchen. I tiptoed toward the sound, holding my breath. The storm's noise filled the air, but the house was silent now. I reached the kitchen and saw the refrigerator door hanging open slightly. It squeaked eerily as the wind blew through the cracks. I closed the door, laughing at myself for getting scared. After returning to my movie, I began to hear whispering, soft and low. I paused the film and listened closely. Was someone there? I called out, "Hello? Is anyone there?" My voice echoed back. I felt a chill go down my spine. Maybe it was the wind, I thought. I decided to head to bed, thinking I was just tired. But as I climbed under my covers, I couldn't shake the unsettling feeling that something was off. I closed my eyes, hoping sleep would come quickly to me. Instead, I heard footsteps, soft shuffling sounds like someone was walking in my apartment. I shot up in bed, my heart pounding louder than the thunder outside. I grabbed my phone to use as a flashlight. With trembling hands, I quietly got out of bed and tiptoed down the hallway. The footsteps stopped, and I felt frozen. I reached the living room and shone the light around, but I was alone. Just as I was about to turn back to my room, I saw it, a dark shadow in the corner of the room. It was tall and seemed to be watching me. I rubbed my eyes, thinking I was seeing things. But when I opened them again, the shadow was still there. My breath caught in my throat as I stared at it. Suddenly, the lights flickered again, and the room felt colder. I turned on every lamp, but it didn't help. The shadow remained. I backed away slowly, not wanting to turn my back to it. I grabbed a pillow from the couch, thinking I could use it to block myself. How silly was that? I finally got enough courage to call out, "Who are you?" Silence. The shadow didn't move, but I felt a strange energy in the air. Then, in the blink of an eye, the shadow rushed at me. I screamed and stumbled backward, falling onto the floor. The air around me felt heavy, like I was in a nightmare from which I couldn't wake up. Out of nowhere, I remembered a story I had read about a ghost. It said that if you faced your fears, sometimes they would go away. I knew I had to be brave. I stood up, still shaking, and faced the shadow head-on. "Leave me alone!" I shouted. And just like that, everything went dark. I saw nothing but blackness enveloping me. I felt a tug like someone was pulling me. Panic surged through me, but I forced myself to stand tall. I pictured my bright day, the sun shining. I took a deep breath and yelled once more, "I'm not afraid of you." The dark began to lift, and I saw the corner of my room again. The shadow was gone. I couldn't believe it. I felt relieved and scared at the same time. But I knew the night wasn't over yet. I returned to my room, still shaking but proud I had faced that fear. As I lay back down, the sound of whispers returned. This time I was tired of being scared. I sat up and yelled, "Why are you here?" The whispering stopped, and I felt the air shift again. Was I dreaming? I could hardly tell. The next moment, I heard a knock at my window. I jumped, thinking it was just a storm. But then I remembered. My window was locked. I moved to the window, half expecting to see a face glaring at me. I slowly pulled back the curtain and looked outside. Nothing but rain and shadows danced in the streetlight. When I returned to bed, I closed my eyes tight. I had to get some sleep. The next thing I knew, I was jolted awake by a loud crash. I shot up, looking around my room. My heart pounded as I tried to piece together what had happened. It was a wild night, but I was still alive. But then I heard a soft giggle. I felt goosebumps on my arms. I wasn't alone. I turned on the light and looked around, but nothing was there. Just the furniture in my room seemed to stare back at me. Finally, I decided to grab my trusty blanket and wrap myself up, hoping to feel safe again. I switched on my favorite comfort show. Maybe it could drown out the scary whispers in my mind. But then, from behind me, I felt a gentle breeze, even though the window was closed tight. I turned around, and my blanket was pulled down, as if someone had just touched it. I sat frozen again, unsure of what to do. "Is anyone there?" I whispered, almost afraid to disturb the unseen presence. The laughter echoed again, closer this time. I glanced toward the door, which had creaked open all by itself. The shadows in the corners shifted like they were alive. I realized I had to make a choice. I could keep being scared, or I could face the fear again. Shaking, I got up and walked toward the door. "I am not afraid," I said, trying to sound braver. As I reached the door, it slammed shut. I jumped back, my heart racing. I grabbed the doorknob and turned, yanking the door open and stepping out into the hallway. With the light from my phone guiding me, I navigated through the dark apartment. Every little noise made me jump, but push forward I did. The living room was empty, but more shadows danced along the walls. I could feel my heart thudding in my chest as I faced them. I shouted loudly, "You have to leave me alone." This caught me off guard because I hadn't meant to yell that loud. My voice echoed, and for a moment, it felt like a weight had lifted. Then, slowly but surely, the shadows began to pull back. The temperature in the room seemed to rise, and I started to breathe easier. I had never felt such relief before. But just when I thought I was safe, a loud crash came from the kitchen again. This time, I ran toward it. When I reached the kitchen, I couldn't believe what I saw. All the cabinets were open, and pots were spilled all over the floor. How could this be happening? Was I going crazy? I decided to check if something had fallen. As I picked up a pot, I heard giggles again, but this time they were playful, not scary. I turned around, and standing there was a tiny, ghostly figure. It looked like a little girl with bright eyes and a big smile. "Are you a nice ghost?" I asked cautiously. The little girl nodded vigorously, giggling again. I couldn't help but relax a little. She seemed more mischievous than menacing. "Why are you here?" I continued, curious. She pointed to the other side of the room. I followed her tiny finger and spotted an old, dusty box pushed against the wall. The girl floated over to it and beckoned me to follow her. I was nervous but intrigued. As I approached the box, the girl clapped her hands excitedly. I hesitated but finally kneeled down and opened the box. Inside lay an assortment of old toys, dolls, a toy car, and even a teddy bear. It hit me then. This sweet little ghost must have loved playing here once. Maybe she didn't want to scare me, but just wanted someone to share her toys with. "You miss playing, don't you?" I asked softly. The ghost nodded again, her smile beaming. In that moment, the fear I felt began to fade. I began to understand that she was lonely and just needed a friend. I looked around the messy kitchen and took a deep breath. I promised her I would play with her toys. So, we sat on the floor and I picked up a doll. Together, we made up a story about the adventures the doll would have. The shadows around me shifted and danced, but they felt lighter now. No more fear hung thick in the air. For hours, the two of us played in the warmth of the kitchen. It was a strange feeling, but I felt happy. I could feel the ghost's happiness too. She twirled and spun, hovering slightly above the floor as we laughed together. Eventually, I noticed how the storm outside had calmed. The rain had stopped, and the shadows were starting to vanish. The ghost looked at me with a glimmer in her eyes, and I sensed it was time for her to go. "Are you leaving?" I asked softly. She nodded, her smile never fading. As she began to fade away, I felt sad but also grateful for our time together. "I'll miss you," I said. Before vanishing completely, she waved goodbye, and I could still hear her giggle echo in the air. Once she disappeared, the kitchen felt lighter, almost peaceful. I completed my night feeling different. I knew I had faced my fears and made a friend out of something scary. I crawled back into bed, thankful for the experience. I respected the ghost spirit, and I understood that sometimes fears could lead to the most unexpected friendships. As I lay in bed, my heart finally quieted and sleep took over. The night wrapped around me comfortably, and I felt safe in my home again. Tomorrow would be a new day, and I knew I'd never see the shadows the same way again. And as I drifted off, a little voice whispered in my mind, "Goodbye, my friend," and I smiled as the dreams carried me away. As I drifted off, a little voice whispered in my mind, "Goodbye, my friend," and I smiled as the dreams carried me away. But sleep didn't last long. I was suddenly jolted awake by a loud crash in the living room, just like before. My heart thumped heavily in my chest as I glanced at the clock. It was still the middle of the night. As I slowly got out of bed, a sinking feeling washed over me. It was as if that earlier ghostly encounter had only been a moment of calm before something even creepier came to visit. I crept toward the living room, every little creak of the floorboards echoing in the silence. It was dark, and my phone light felt so weak against the shadowy corners of my home. With each step, I could feel the hairs on the back of my neck standing up. When I reached the doorframe, I paused. The air felt heavy, as if something was waiting, holding its breath, ready to pounce. I caught my breath and stepped into the room. What I saw made me feel like my heart stopped. The room was a mess. The furniture was turned over, and all my photos hung askew on the walls. The sofa cushions were ripped, as if something had been digging through them. I blinked, trying to absorb what was happening. Was it possible my late-night playmate had returned with a friend? Panic surged through me when I heard a soft scratching sound, like someone was trying to get in. I spun around, shining my light toward the window. My heart sank as I realized it wasn't the storm causing the noise. It was coming from inside the apartment. The scratching grew louder, more frantic, like fingernails dragging across the floor. I backed away slowly, knowing I had to face whatever it was. In that moment, I remembered how brave I had been earlier, and I clung to that thought. "Who's there?" I called out, trying to sound stronger than I felt. Silence followed, and then the scratching stopped. I listened closely, breathing heavily as I tried to gather my courage. Just as I thought I might be alone, a shadow darted past my peripheral vision. I gasped and turned quickly, my light flickering wildly. This time, it felt like I was being watched, not just haunted. My legs felt like jelly, but I forced myself to step deeper into the darkness. That's when I saw it. A figure perched on my coffee table, a small silhouette that looked like a child. The shadows concealed its face, but I could see its eyes glinting in the darkness. They were wide open, staring at me. Fear gripped my throat, and I swallowed hard. "Are you a different ghost?" I whispered, unsure if I wanted an answer. The figure tilted its head, but didn't move or speak. Instead, it pointed toward the hallway. I could see more movement behind it, a swirl of darkness that wasn't just the shadows. Other figures began to emerge, each one looking like variations of children, all giggling softly. They were not just spirits. They looked like a whole group of lost souls. And suddenly, the air felt ice cold. "What do you want?" I managed to say, my voice barely a whisper as I fought the urge to run. The child on the table giggled again and jumped down, landing silently on the floor. It started moving toward me, followed by the others, who danced and twirled around my feet. Their voices turned into whispers, a chorus of playful, yet unsettling sound that made the hairs on my arms stand on end. With every step they took, the temperature plunged, wrapping me in a chiller that cut through my skin. Before I could make sense of it, one of the children swirled around me, grasping my hand tightly. I felt the tug of invisible threads, pulling me toward the hallway. I fought against it. "Let go!" I shouted, trying to break free from their grip. But they only laughed, a high-pitched and eerie sound that echoed off the walls. My instincts kicked in. I turned sharply and sprinted back to the living room. But the atmosphere had changed entirely. The room felt alive, almost ready to swallow me whole. Dark shadows danced around the walls, twisting into shapes that felt menacing. I could sense their longing, their need for companionship and chaos. Somehow, they wanted me to join their twisted game. Then, I stumbled into my kitchen. Everything was still scattered about from earlier. The ghostly figure that had played with me earlier flashed through my mind. I took a deep breath and shouted, "I'm not afraid of you." But the words felt weak in the heavy air. Suddenly, a loud bang echoed throughout the apartment. The cabinets flew open again, this time with enough force to rattle the dishes inside. I spotted one of my favorite jars soaring through the air, shattering against the wall. Shards scattering across the floor filled the space with a sharp tang of fear. Gulping down my terror, I quickly looked around, searching for a way out. That's when I noticed the reflection in the window. The outside world was no longer just rain. Twisted branches seemed to reach toward me, and the moonlight filtered through like a spotlight, casting long shadows across the floor. I dashed to the window, wanting to escape this madness, but everything outside felt wrong. Upon my reflection, I glanced back and saw one of the ghost children peering over my shoulder, a wicked grin stretching across its face. I screamed but locked eyes with it for just a moment before finding my voice. "Leave me alone. I want to be left in peace." But the words fell useless, buried beneath the echoing laughter of the spirits. The shadows thickened and charged toward me. Panic washed over me as I felt the room closing in. I sprinted back into the living room, looking for a weapon, anything to stop this spectral chaos. The playful spirits were now no longer cute. They lurked in every corner, waiting for me to let my guard down. I grabbed a heavy book from the coffee table, feeling the weight of it in my hand. As I turned to face them, the once playful spirits seemed to merge into a swirling mass of darkness, their laughter shifting into low, chilling whispers. "Play with us?" "No!" I shouted, and with every ounce of strength, I hurled the book at the swirling shadows. It collided with one of them, sending the figure spiraling away with a shriek, but the others only swarmed, angrier now. I could feel the cold air wrap around me tighter, constricting like a python ready to squeeze the life out of me. "Not again! Please, let me be!" I yelled, but no one seemed to hear. Taking a desperate chance, I remembered something I had read about spirits. They fed on fear. If I could show that I wouldn't be scared, maybe they would leave me alone. Gritting my teeth, I stood tall and held my ground. "You can't scare me. I'm not your toy." As if on cue, the laughter abruptly stopped. The shadows hesitated, and I sensed a moment of confusion among them. It was as if I had pressed pause on their chaotic dance. I took a step forward, my resolve hardening with each second. "You want to play games? Fine, let's play," I challenged, and to my surprise, the spirits pulled back a bit. It was working. I felt more powerful than before. Now, however, a new sound broke the silence. A low rumble echoed from the hallway. I turned toward the hallway, and my stomach dropped. A new shadow started to materialize, much larger than the ghost children. This one was dark, swirling with ominous energy. It loomed in the doorway, blocking the light from the hallway and casting a terrifying silhouette in the room. The air shifted again, heavier and thick with dread. "Leave now, poltergeist!" I shouted, feeling the courage swell within me. But the shadow only laughed, a deep, echoing sound that rattled my bones. With one swift movement, it advanced toward me, and in that moment, every instinct screamed for me to run. But I couldn't. I wasn't going to let fear take control again. This was my home, and I had to defend it. I picked up another book, this one an old, heavy hardcover, and as the shadow neared, I threw it with all my might at the menacing figure. The book soared straight through the air, striking the shadow. A crackle of energy surged, almost like a miniature thunderbolt. The shadow jerked back, momentarily stunned. I seized the moment, feeling empowered. "Leave! You don't belong here!" I shouted one last time, channeling everything I had into my voice. For a split moment, the shadow looked uncertain, as if it was questioning its presence. The atmosphere around me crackled and twisted as the other spirits joined in, swirling around the big shadow like a whirlwind, their laughter becoming chaotic and overwhelming. I could feel the pull of their energy, trying to drag me down into their ghostly game. But I resisted, standing firm where I was. I focused on being brave, and I locked my eyes on the large shadow. "I won't let you win," I yelled, defiance burning brightly within me. It howled in anger, flames of darkness erupting and flickering as though trying to engulf everything in its path. The other spirits joined it, pulling me toward their twisted fun. Fear crept back in, trying to latch onto me again, but I battled against it. Together, we were stronger. I could feel it. As I pushed back, the small figures lifted toward the ceiling, their mischievous spirits stirring in a frenzy. Suddenly, the balance shifted. The small ghost children spiraled together, combining their energy, and launched toward the large shadow, creating a brilliant burst of light. The bright glow filled the room, blinding me momentarily. I tried to shield my eyes, but I could hear the shadow scream in fury. And at that moment, I realized this was my chance. I focused on that bright light, letting it ignite my courage, and called out, "You have no power here." I could feel my heart pounding in my chest, invigorating me. The large shadow faltered, retreating as the glowing energy surrounded it, tightening its grip. With one final exertion of will, I shouted louder than I ever had before. "Be gone!" The light erupted, and for what felt like an eternity, the room was engulfed in brilliance. The shadow roared one last time before dissolving into nothingness, consumed by the brightness. As the light faded, I stood in silence, heart racing and breathing heavily. I looked around. The small spirits were still there, flickering like fireflies, but they seemed more tranquil now. They hovered around me, their faces lit with smiles, and I felt a wave of peace wash over me. "Thank you," I whispered, not quite sure what else to say. They giggled softly, and one by one, they began to float up toward the ceiling. I watched as the joyful spirits faded, leaving behind a gentle warmth that filled the room. With the morning light beginning to break through the windows, I stood alone in my living room, weary but relieved. I felt different, lighter somehow. But then, I noticed something flickering in the corner of my eye again, a small shadow still moving. Fear crept back in, but I squashed it down. Maybe, just maybe, there was still one more spirit wanting to play. The question lingered in the air, wrapped in intrigue and fear. What more awaited me in the shadows? And would I be brave enough to face it? I stood frozen in place, the fading warmth from the playful spirits still lingering around me. They had vanished, leaving a sense of calm, but an unsettling silence filled the room. I glanced toward the flickering shadow in the corner of my eye, and it felt like something was peering back from the depths of the dark. With each second, my heart raced faster. I took a deep breath, reminding myself that I had faced terrifying things and survived. I had no idea what was lurking in the corners, but I felt compelled to find out. I slowly turned to face the lingering shadow, its outline shifting and writhing like a living being. The darkness seemed to breathe, deepening the chilling silence in the air. I stepped forward, my hands trembling, but my mind racing with thoughts. "What do you want?" I called out, my voice a mixture of fear and challenge. Suddenly, a cold wind swirled through the room, flickering the light from my phone. It carried with it the sweet scent of decay, making me gag for a moment. I staggered back, glancing toward the window. Outside, the storm had returned, the wind howling like a wild creature. I turned back toward the shadow, which had started to thicken, growing more defined. It felt as if it was forming into something tangible, a heartless mass of darkness ready to pounce. My brain screamed at me to run, but my body was paralyzed with uncertainty. In the blink of an eye, it solidified into a tall figure with elongated limbs. I squinted to see its face, but all I caught was a dark, gaping maw where a mouth should be. The absence of features made it even more terrifying. I could see the void within, a blackness that seemed to pull in all the light around it. "Leave me alone!" I shouted, trying to regain my composure. The figure lurched closer, and with every step, the room seemed to grow colder, an unnatural chill that numbed my skin. The shadows around the walls twisted and swirled, forming grotesque shapes. My instincts kicked in. I knew I had to move. With a burst of adrenaline, I ran toward the kitchen again, hoping to find something, anything, to protect myself from this creature. Behind me, I could hear it moving, its heavy footsteps echoing in the stillness. I glanced over my shoulder and was shocked to see it gliding rather than walking, its body hovering just inches above the ground. In a panic, I flung open the kitchen drawers, searching for a knife or something sharp. My breath came out in ragged gasps as I rummaged through utensils, my fingers trembling. The creature was growing closer, the chilling air wrapping around me and tightening like a noose. Just as I thought I would find nothing, my fingers brushed against the hilt of a sharp kitchen knife. I gripped it tightly, raising it as if it would protect me. But in that moment, I realized that deep down I was still scared. I didn't want to hurt anything. I just wanted this nightmare to end. Turning back toward the living room, I prepared for what was coming. As I stepped back into the room, the figure had transformed again. It was larger, more menacing, and it let out a low growl that reverberated through my bones. I could feel the pressure building in the air, like a storm ready to break. Shadows twisted around the creature like a cloak of darkness, threatening to swallow me whole. The thing opened its mouth wide, and from within, a noise erupted that sounded like a mix of wailing souls and laughter, creating an eerie symphony of despair. It had grown more powerful, feeding off my fear. Panic surged inside me again. I could feel it feeding on my dread, spiraling deeper into my mind. "Get out of my home!" I shouted, my voice wavering but defiant. To my surprise, the creature hesitated, hovering for a moment as if considering my words. The laughter from its mouth turned chaotic, mingling with the echoes of the spirits I had encountered before. Maybe there was still a chance to connect with whatever was tormenting me, something that still held a thread of humanity. I took a step forward, lowering the knife slightly. "You're not alone," I said, my voice shaking but steady. "I know you're just lost. I can help you." I didn't know how I would help a dark entity, but I had to try. The figure's growl turned into something more sobering, a low rumble that shook me to my core. Maybe it was responding to my words, shifting in recognition. I could see the shadows surrounding it swirling faster, writhing as if they were alive, consumed by its feelings. The air around us crackled with tension, vibrant emotions swirling between us. "Show me," I urged, hoping that somehow we would find common ground. "What do you want from me?" The creature raised a long, twisted arm, pointing to the corner where a thick, dark mist began to rise. My heart raced as I watched the ground where it gestured. The mist began to form shapes, figures of other lost souls, their faces twisted in anguish, caught in their own torment. A realization hit me. This entity was tied to them, and those lost spirits were part of its very being. I could feel my chest tighten as the shadows danced, the wailing echoing louder. "You're trapped by them," I gasped. At that moment, a spark of understanding ignited inside me. The figure shuddered, a haunting sound vibrating in the air. This wasn't a monster. It was a reflection of pain, all the grief it had witnessed trapped inside of it. I took a cautious step closer, feeling a strange sense of sympathy bloom within my fear. "Let me help you set them free," I offered, not sure how I would manage to do something so grand. In response, the creature recoiled, its form pulsating. I could see shadows shooting out, thrashing wildly as they tried to escape the grip of the darkness. The more it writhed, the more intense the despair grew, as if the shadows were fighting against the ties of their imprisonment. They screamed out in languages I couldn't understand. It pierced through me, igniting a deep sadness within my heart. "Please, just let go," I pleaded. "Fight for them. You can be free too." I could feel the warmth of tears welling up in my eyes as I made the connection. The figure hesitated, its features shifting, uncertain. It seemed to listen, the growl fading slightly. I had no idea if I was having any effect, but I pressed on, determined to reach its heart. Together, we can help them rest. For a brief moment, the creature froze. Shadows twisted, swirling around it like a storm caught in its own thrall. Suddenly it roared, a horrific, swirling cacophony of sound that rattled the walls. "No!" I cried, but before I could react, it lunged toward the misty figures. I was taken aback and stumbled back, realizing too late that the shadows wanted to remain trapped. The creature began pulling them toward itself, dragging them into a dark vortex, trying to reclaim what it had lost. I quickly raised the knife again, ready to defend against this terrible act. "Stop!" I shouted, but my voice melded with the wailing cries echoing through the room. With every shadow it captured, the creature became more unstable, flickering dangerously as it fought against its own fate. Then, in a moment of desperation, I lunged forward, knife raised, and yelled, "I won't let you take them again." I aimed for the swirling mass, the knife striking the ground, forcing my energy into the shadows I'd come to know. Suddenly, the room erupted in a blinding flash of light. The shadows shrieked in a deafening chorus, the walls cracking as the vibration resonated through the floor. I was thrown back against the wall, feeling the pull of the shockwave wrap around me. As I hit the ground, light engulfed everything, and I shielded my eyes. The last thing I heard was the triumphant cry of the spirits echoing around me, breaking free from their bindings. The darkness scattered, fading into nothingness as the warmth filled every corner of the room. And just like that, it was gone. I lay still, panting and bewildered, as silence returned to the apartment. For a moment, I didn't move. I felt hollow, but relieved. It was over. I blinked a few times before pulling myself up from the floor, scanning the room to ensure it was truly done. There was no more darkness. All I saw were the remnants of whatever had just happened. Broken shadows fading into the corners, and a silence that felt almost sacred. I hoped those lost spirits had finally found their way home. But just as I began to breathe easy, a soft flicker caught my eye again. In the corner of the living room, glowing faintly, a little ball of light danced before me. The light pulsed gently, casting a warm glow across the room. I couldn't believe my eyes. "Is that you?" I whispered, stepping cautiously closer. The light swirled around me in joyful loops, and in that moment, I realized it was a spark of the little ghost, the one who had come to play. I felt tears in my eyes as the warmth filled my heart. But just when I thought I might finally find peace, a deep voice reverberated through the air, chilling my entire body. "You have merely opened the door." The words hung heavy and dark, echoing throughout my once peaceful home. My heart raced again. I had done something, and something had changed forever. As I looked around the room, I felt uneasy. Something else had started to awake in the shadows. "Who's there?" I called out, my voice shaking again. And for a moment, that flickering light faded slightly, obscured by an unsettling presence growing in the depths where the playful spirits used to dance. My heart dropped. What had I really unleashed? The ending of one chapter felt like the beginning of something much darker. As I stood there frozen, dread washed over me in waves. I felt the chill returning, creeping into every bone. The warmth was gone, replaced by tension in the air. Was I really ever safe? The haunting question filled my mind as I stood, scanning the shadows. They began to twist and writhe around me once again. As I stood there frozen, dread washed over me in waves. I felt the chill returning, creeping into every bone. The warmth was gone, replaced by tension in the air. The shadows twisted and writhed around me once again, changing shape and form as if something was awakening deep beneath their surface. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my racing heart. But the atmosphere felt charged, like electricity humming in the air. It was all too sudden. I could sense a presence building in the corners, something dark lurking just out of sight. What have I done? I whispered to myself. Every instinct told me to flee, but my feet felt glued to the floor. As the flickering light faded completely, the room grew darker than before. I forced myself to move, but stepping away felt like an act of betrayal against whatever small spirit had just flickered away. Yet I couldn't shake the fear that gripped my throat. I cautiously backed toward the exit, eyes scanning the corners for any signs of movement. But then I heard it, a soft rustle, almost a whisper that slithered through the silence. It was faint at first, but quickly grew louder, a chorus of breathy voices speaking in frantic tones. They called out, but their words twisted into something unnatural, a cacophony that sent shivers down my spine. I pressed my hands over my ears, desperately trying to block out the sound, but nothing worked. The voices grew more urgent, rising into a terrifying crescendo that filled every nook of the room. They weren't just one or two voices. They were countless whispers, overlapping and intertwining, creating a tapestry of dread. "Help us," one voice begged, chilling me to the bone. "Free us," another cried, its tone echoing with desperation. I could feel their pain. It seeped into my skin like ice water rushing through my veins. I shook my head, trying to clear the fog of confusion. "What do you want from me?" I shouted, my voice drowned out by their wailing. Just then, shadows shot out from the corners, their movement quick and erratic. They flashed toward me and back again, like frantic moths drawn to a flickering flame. It was maddening, and I ducked instinctively, fearing they might reach out and grab me. My heart pounded in my chest as I could barely see through the swirling mass of darkness. Something pulled at the edge of my vision. Turning quickly, I caught a glimpse of a small figure behind the shadows. Was it the same little spirit that had danced earlier? It flickered uncertainly, flicking in and out of existence as if the shadows were swallowing it whole. All at once, the terror of losing this tiny essence filled me with determination. I stepped forward, driven by a sudden need to protect what was left. "I won't let you take them," I cried, thrusting my knife into the chaos, blending it with the swirling shadows. The dark mass screamed, the voices reaching a deafening pitch as the blade cut through. Instead of slicing, it felt like I had unleashed something uncontrollable. The shadows exploded outward, revealing faces twisted in sorrow, confusion, and anger. I stumbled back, my breath catching in my throat as I met their gazes. There were faces of familiar features, those who had lived in this space, long ago, trapped in their sadness. I recognized them from dark corners of history, faces that haunted stories passed down through generations. They were trapped here, and they wanted out. "Please, help us," one phantom pleaded, a young girl with wide, soulful eyes that reflected loss. The rest echoed her cries, rising up like an otherworldly storm around me. I looked at the girl, feeling a rush of compassion. "I want to help," I shouted over the noise. "But how?" She pointed a frail finger toward the depths of the shadows where the darkness pooled like a black ocean. "You must confront it. Find the heart of the darkness." With shaking hands, I gripped the knife firmly once more. The weight of it felt both comforting and terrifying, and I couldn't ignore the urgency in her voice. Taking a deep breath, I realized I needed to face whatever lay hidden in the depths once and for all. Stepping cautiously towards the pooling shadows, I focused on the girl's gaze as she encouraged me silently. There was a vastness to the darkness that paralyzed me for a moment, but just as fear threatened to wash over me again, I marched forward. The shadows pressed in on me, thick and suffocating. I felt like I was walking through a viscous fog, each step dragging me deeper into something ancient. The wails of the trapped souls grew fainter, replaced with the low, menacing growl I had heard before, intense and rumbling like thunder. With every heartbeat, I felt drawn to the core of it. Having already fought the initial wave, This felt like an entirely different challenge, heavy and thick like I was rooted in place. The air crackled, a dark aura pulsating around me, and with each movement, the weight on my chest grew heavier. Then, as I neared the center, I caught sight of something, a glimmer, small and bright against the darkness. It pulsed like a heartbeat. I stepped closer, the light flickering and dancing in rhythm, calling me forward. Suddenly, part of the surrounding shadows began to shift, revealing a massive hollow figure. It was piled high with twisted faces merging into one, their eyes hollow, their mouths open in perpetual screams, a collective darkness that made me stagger back. Despite the instinct telling me to run, I pressed onward. My grip tightened on the knife, adrenaline propelling me forward. I shouted again, "Leave them be!" My voice echoed around me, bouncing off the walls of shadows, ringing louder than before. The darkness trembled, and the figure surged toward me, a monstrous wave of despair, threatening to engulf me whole. I raised the knife high, the small light in my periphery guiding me. The heartbeat quickened, resonating with urgency, urging me on. "Fight!" The girl's voice echoed in my mind. With a fierce cry, I lunged forward, plunging the knife deep into the pulsing mass. I could feel resistance, something hard and treacherous trapped within. With a surge of power, I twisted the blade. The darkness screamed, a horrifying cacophony that sent vibrations through my bones. It shook violently, lurching backward as light erupted from the point of contact. The pulse quickened, illuminating the shadows around me, illuminating faces once hidden in darkness. The spirits I had encountered swirled in the light, their relief palpable. The hollowness began to break apart, fragments of the darkness shattering like glass. I stumbled as the force of the light pushed me back, but I held firm. I wasn't done yet. "Stay free," I yelled, willing the light to escape this dark world. The pulsing became a bright beacon, enveloping everything in its embrace, brighter than I could bear. I could feel the darkness around me receding, the anguished faces dissolving into particles of light, released from their prison. As I stood there, I realized the force was beginning to pull me in as well. I felt weightless, but the welcoming warmth surrounded me, wrapping me in a cocoon of comfort. The darkness was dwindling, replaced by brilliant light that eclipsed all my fears. But just as I thought I was finally free, an icy grip tightened around my ankle. I looked down in horror to see a slender shadow reaching up, trying to drag me down into its murky depths. "You can't escape," it hissed, the voice chilling me to the core. I knelt, trying to shake it loose, but it only clutched tighter. The brightness dimmed slightly, and in that heartbeat, I knew I couldn't let it pull me back into despair. "Get away!" I yelled, trying to make it sound powerful, trying to channel every ounce of bravery I had left. Struggling, I gripped the knife with both hands and stabbed down into the darkness below. "Leave me!" The shadow screamed in an otherworldly wail, recoiling as the light erupted again, forcing it back into the abyss from which it came. But I wasn't safe yet. The darkness around me was swirling, rising like a storm, and I braced myself against the onslaught. My heart thundered in my chest as I struggled against the tide. I had to hold on. I had to be strong. The spirits were counting on me. With a new resolve, I plunged the knife again, drawing more light out from the core of the darkness, every strike weakening the hold it had on me. The shadows where I stood fractured, turning into fireflies bursting from their prison. The overwhelming darkness began to diminish, illuminating the chaotic room, fading into nothingness until all that remained was light. As I stood with the weight of the world on my shoulders, time stretched into eternity. The shadows swirled, but I could see relief in their wake. I sensed that I was finally winning. But just as the last of the shadows flickered away, a deep, penetrating silence fell. The stillness was unsettling, the calm after a storm, too quiet for my racing heart. I turned slowly, catching a glimmer of something lingering at the edge of my vision. In the flickering remain of shadow, another figure stood, This one was larger, more defined, rising slowly from the ground where the others had dissipated. It turned to face me, expressionless but terrifying. I could feel the air thicken once more, a chill creeping back to fill the room. A low growl echoed, sending chills down my spine. This wasn't over yet. The darkness had a new face, and in that moment, I knew I would have to fight again. I felt that I wasn't safe anymore. The shadow loomed larger, stretching its dark limbs, creating an oppressive presence that assaulted my senses. The air around me thickened, like I was submerged in cold water. I could barely breathe as fear clawed at my throat. This thing, whatever it was, had a darkness that felt ancient. It reflected my worst fears, a manifestation of everything that haunted my nights. The growl grew louder, vibrating through the walls, making the floor tremble beneath my feet. I instinctively took a step back, and the ground felt alive, pulsing as if it were connected to the creature somehow. "This is your end," it rumbled, its voice like gravel scraping against metal. I could sense its rage simmering just beneath its facade. It advanced toward me, the shadows curling around its feet, pulling it closer to me, as if my very essence fueled its strength. My heart raced as I picked up the knife again, trying to muster courage. I realized I needed to confront this thing, but just then it moved with terrifying speed. One moment it was standing several feet away, and the next it was right in front of me, a dark blur cutting through the air. I swung the knife wildly, aiming for the center of the creature. But it just turned with supernatural speed, dodging my strike effortlessly, and I stumbled forward from the momentum. The creature let out a chilling laugh that echoed off the walls, a sound that twisted deep inside my chest, making my knees feel weak. "You think you can fight me?" it taunted. "You are merely a whisper in the void." The confidence in its voice sent a shiver down my spine. I could feel the coldness creeping into my skin, the darkness wrapping around me like a suffocating blanket. Desperation clawed at me as the weight of hopelessness loomed. I needed to focus. I couldn't let it win. I took a shaky breath, steeling myself. "I won't let you take what's left of this place," I shouted, my voice shaky but determined. With a burst of adrenaline, I lunged forward again, aiming for its heart. The creature hissed in fury, its shadowy form rippling like water disturbed by a stone. I felt an odd sensation, as though my attack was stirring something deep within it. As I drove the knife into its form, a surge of dark energy pulsed back at me, knocking me off my feet. I crashed to the ground, the knife slipping from my grip. "You cannot win." The creature leaned closer, its grotesque face twisting in a sneer. I could see an old familiarity in its features, fragments of the lost souls it had consumed reflected in its eyes. "I am eternal. I am all your fears made real." Struggling to get back up, I scrambled across the floor, my eyes darting for the weapon. I could feel the shadows wrapping around my ankles, dragging me back towards the depths. Panic surged through me, and I kicked at the darkness, forcing myself to move. Finally, my fingers brushed against the knife, hot from the earlier confrontation. I grasped it tightly, feeling the cold metal against my palm, rejuvenating my resolve. "You are wrong," I yelled, finding my voice again. "I am not afraid." With newfound courage, I charged forward again, the blade held high. The creature growled as I swung, my vision narrowing on its horrid face. Each swing sent ripples of light through the darkness, illuminating the tortured souls trapped behind it. The entity jerked back, letting out a furious roar that shook the very floor beneath us. "You will regret this." The shadows twisted into sharp blades that sliced through the air, narrowly missing me. I ducked just in time, feeling the rush of wind as they swept past, a sinister whisper grazing my ear. Desperation ignited within me. I couldn't let this entity claim me or the others lost to it. I had to find a way to break its hold. Out of instinct, I remembered the small light that had danced earlier, the flicker of hope. "Show me," I yelled, feeling the energy rising in my chest. I am not alone in this fight. The blade of light seemed to pulse within me, responding to my will against the dark forces. The creature trembled, confusion flickering in its eyes as if my courage had thrown it off balance. The lights of the souls became clearer now, swirling around us like fireflies. They pushed against the darkness, colliding with the creature, filling the room with vibrant warmth. "Help us," they whispered in unison, their collective voice growing stronger. Feeling their power swell beside me, I lunged once more, stabbing down at the looming mass that threatened to consume everything I held dear. This time, the blade connected with a solid force, and light erupted from the impact, bright and blinding. With each strike, I felt the darkness shatter. Cracks spread across the creature's form, and tendrils of shadow twisted and abandoned it, splintering off into the corners of the room, shrieking as they drifted away. "No!" It screamed, its face warping grotesquely. I couldn't help but feel a strange satisfaction at seeing it falter. The room vibrated with energy as the spirits swirled around us, brighter and more vibrant than ever before. But before I could celebrate, the creature unleashed a wave of darkness, surging toward me. I braced for impact as the last remnants came crashing down. My knees buckled as the shadows hit me, wrapping tightly around my limbs, pulling me closer, deeper into the abyss. Just as despair began to settle in again, I remembered the warmth of the spirits surrounding me. Gritting my teeth, I pushed against the cold grasp, reaching for the knife that felt like the only anchor in this storm. "No more!" I roared, summoning every ounce of strength to fight back against the encroaching darkness. In that moment of desperation, I felt the light in me surge brighter. I plunged the knife into the ground, the vibrations resonating through the floor. The dark wave recoiled, the force pushing against me as if I had turned the tide. "Fight!" I felt the spirits urging me on, their illuminating presence like a rallying cry. I closed my eyes, visualizing the warmth breaking through the cold barrier, feeling the shadows splinter beneath my will. When I opened my eyes again, I looked directly at the creature, now weakened and struggling against the light. "I want you to leave," I shouted, finding my voice again, shaking off the chilling grasp that threatened to consume me. "I am stronger than you." The creature writhed in fury, but I could see the cracks deepening in its form. The faces of the lost were emerging more clearly now, their pain transforming into something brighter, pushing through the tangled mass. Once again, I filled my lungs with breath, pulling my resolve together. I plunged the knife into the ground with all my might, my intent radiating through the space, illuminating everything, showing them that they could be free. One last time, I aimed for the beast, now just a shadow of its former self, and struck the center with everything I had, feeling sparks of light explode on impact. The shadows convulsed and screamed, the angry mass disintegrating before my eyes, fading into nothingness. The air felt lighter, and the warmth was returning, filling the void left behind by the darkness. Finally, silence enveloped the room. It was an unfamiliar quiet, a stillness that seeped into my marrow. I dropped to my knees, breathing heavily as if I had run a marathon. The spirits gathered around me, their light flickering gently and warmly, illuminating the corners of the space. One by one, they reached out, gently encompassing me with their warmth, filling me with gratitude and relief. They were free now, and for the first time, I could see their faces more clearly. The little girl smiled, her eyes filled with light. "Thank you," she said, her voice echoing softly like a gentle breeze. But before I could respond, shadows in the distance flickered again, gathering near the walls. I looked up, alarm coursing through me. Just when I thought I was rid of the darkness, it began to take shape once more, darker than before. A heavy presence loomed, not from a single creature, but from multiple shades gathering, laughing alongside the remnants of the one I had just defeated. The shadows replicated and multiplied, all drawing together, forming something larger and much more sinister. I stared in horror as the amalgamation took form, feasting off the fear and exhaustion radiating from me. My heart sank. I thought I had solved my nightmare, but it looked like I had ignited something far worse. As I stood, paralyzed with dread, a sense of doom washed over me. The darkness twisted and snaked around me, and I could sense the presence of what was coming, deeper than before. I took a step back as they closed in, an army of shadows ready to reclaim their territory. "I can't do this again," I shouted, panic flooding my senses. But it was too late. I had to stand my ground. Perhaps I hadn't just been a vessel for the last fight. Maybe there was something within me that held stronger. Drawing from the light still flickering around me, I raised my arms above my head, knitting together every shred of courage. "I will not let you take this place," I cried defiantly. The shadows paused at my proclamation, recoiling as if my voice had pierced through their darkness. For a brief moment, I thought maybe I could conquer this fear. I couldn't be just a whisper in the void anymore. The laughter of the shadows turned into a chorus of furious howls. They converged, trying to envelop me, but I stood firm, fighting off the grip pulling me down. The spirits rallied behind me, their light converging, swirling around me like a protective mantle. With the darkness swirling, the air felt heavy. I struggled to orient myself, grasping at the flickers of light. "We can do this together," I shouted to the spirits, feeling the warmth strengthen within me. The facets of light began to pulse in sync with my heartbeat, growing brighter and brighter. Together, we were more than just a flicker. We became an explosion of brilliance that rattled the walls around us. Suddenly, I felt emboldened, as if I could combat the tides of shadows that loomed. With renewed determination, I launched myself towards the gathering mass. "You cannot have us," I yelled, plunging the knife into the ground once more, feeling the energy flow from my body to the spirits and reclaiming our space. A thunderous crack echoed as the knife pierced the ground deep, a shockwave reverberating outward. The shadows howled, twisting into frantic shapes, retreating from the burgeoning light. As I drove the knife deeper, claws of shadow grasped at me, but the warmth from the spirits engulfed me, creating a barrier against the dark forces trying to reclaim their hold. The shadows convulsed and shrieked, unraveling like mist in the sun as they drifted away from me, their weight lifted and disintegrating into nothingness. I continued pushing, a force of light dispelling darkness under my will. Finally, the last remnants of shadow shattered, collapsing into themselves until silence returned once more. The light enveloped the room completely, illuminating every corner that had once been filled with dread. As the glow settled around me, I collapsed to the ground, breathing heavily, the exhaustion washing over me. I had made it through the battle, but the thought sent a chill through me. I wondered if darkness ever truly died. Looking around, the space felt transformed. Freedom danced across the now brightened room, awash in golden light. I could feel the spirits fluttering nearby, laughter echoing through my mind. But deep within, an unsettling realization crept back. Had I truly defeated all that lurked in the shadows? Or was it waiting, patient and cunning, lurking just beyond the edges of this newfound light? An unsettling thought settled in my bones. One battle won, but did it mean I was safe? I knew I could not let my guard down. The fight wasn't just against the shadows. It was a fight for my very own spirit. As I pondered this, I felt a cold breeze wash over me. Instinctively, I turned, eyes darting nervously across the room. In the shifting shadows, something shifted again, though it was now almost invisible. A faint, unnatural presence lingered, long after the battle had ended. And just like that, I could feel a new fear settle in, a whisper of darkness that would never truly leave, one that I would have to stay vigilant against forever. A shadow flitted across the walls, and my heart began to race again. I was certain I had not seen the last of the lurking terror. Something still waited, and I could feel its eyes, like coal embers glowing, silently watching. I would have to muster all my strength once more. The fear pulsed in my veins, a cold reminder that darkness never fully vanished. I scanned the room, heart pounding, trying to catch a glimpse of whatever was lurking behind the fragile veil of light. As I steadied my breath, I heard a faint whisper, like the rustle of dry leaves in the wind. It curled around me, enticing and sinister. I turned slowly, feeling something shift in the air behind me. Shadows crept along the walls, elongating and blending, as if they were alive, searching for a way to return. Suddenly, a chill swept through the room, making me shiver. The light flickered, dancing nervously, revealing corners that had slipped back into obscurity. I felt an urgent need to move, but my feet felt like lead. That whisper grew louder, more insistent, almost calling my name. "Come closer," it teased, echoing through the space like a taunt. I clutched the knife, reinforcing my grip as I took a cautious step forward, drawn by some unseen force. Yet, dread clung to me like a heavy fog. I wanted to run away, but I couldn't look away from the shadows. They began to coil together, twisting as if they were forming a body, a shape that was familiar, yet horrifying. My breath caught in my throat as I recognized the outline. It was a figure emerging from the darkness, its features indistinct, but I could feel its eyes boring into me, probing my mind. "Do you remember me?" The voice cut through the air, darker now, wrapping around my heart. "You tried to forget, but I never left. I was always here." Panic surged through me. That voice had once been a cruel echo from my past, a remnant of everything I had fought against. I wanted to scream, to tell it to go away, but the words stuck in my throat. Instead, I stood frozen, trapped between fear and disbelief. The shape began to solidify, the shadow twisting into a grotesque form. It smiled, an unsettling grin that sent waves of nausea through me. I blinked, trying to convince myself it wasn't real, that it was just a trick of the light. But the smirk widened, and I suddenly understood that this was not merely an illusion. With a surge of anger, I raised the knife high, determined to fight again. "You will not take me," I shouted, forcing the words out despite the tremor in my voice. But deep down, I felt the weight of doubt creeping in. Could I really face this thing again? The creature laughed, a chilling sound that echoed eerily in the now stifling air. "You think you're strong enough? You are nothing compared to the shadows. You can't fight what you have become." As its words sank in, a wave of despair crashed over me. It was right. I had been marked by these encounters, and a part of me feared I carried their darkness within. I was battling more than just a monster. I was fighting against parts of myself I longed to escape. "Look at your hands." The beast glided forward, its movements smooth and fluid, like oil on water. "Feel the darkness wrapping around your heart. You won't break free. You belong to me." I felt a deep shiver run down my spine. The shadows lunged at me, stretching out in tendrils, each one seeking to wrap around me like chains. I clenched my teeth, refusing to give in. Just as I thought I might scream, the spirits fluttered around me again, their light growing in intensity. "Remember why you are here," they whispered. "You have the strength." Their words surged through me, dispelling some of the suffocating darkness. I felt the warmth of their presence, a shield against the malevolence threatening to consume me. Fueled by this newfound energy, I charged forward, driving the knife toward the figure. It laughed again, but there was uncertainty in its voice. "You're a fool to think you can pierce the gloom." But I didn't hesitate. I plunged the blade into the shadow, feeling it connect with the hard surface, the shimmer of light bursting from the impact. The figure writhed, howling as the light engulfed it. "No!" It screamed, the sound ripping through the air, tearing at my sanity. "You cannot defeat me." As I withdrew the knife, a burst of clarity enveloped me. I had faced shadows before, and I would do it again. Raw determination surged through me, igniting within me a fire that pushed back against the encroaching darkness. "You are wrong," I yelled defiantly. "I am not alone. I have the light." With each thrust of the knife, I felt the darkness pull away. The figure stumbled, disoriented as I struck again and again, the brilliant light bursting forth as I drove the darkness back. The whispers grew fainter, replaced by a symphony of spirits rallying around me, their hope mingling with my own. But just as I felt the tide turning, the shadows coiled tightly around my throat, tightening their grip. I gasped, my breath coming in ragged bursts. The figure's face twisted into something grotesque as it glared at me, fury radiating from its vacant eyes. "You will serve me," it roared, voice echoing with force, pulling me back into the depths. I could feel the darkness clawing at my resolve, fighting to drag me down as I struggled desperately against its grasp. "I won't give in," I shouted, heart pounding in my chest. I sank deeper into the warmth of the spirits around me, willing their strength to flow into me. It merged with my own heartbeat, a rhythm of light pulsing back against the darkness, suffocating me. The shadows faltered for a split second, and I knew I had to seize the opportunity. Summoning every bit of courage I had left, I drove the knife deep into the dark ground, sending the pulse of energy rippling through the floor. With a deafening roar, the shadows began to fracture and splinter, twisting away from me in a cacophony of anguished cries. I lunged forward, striking at the now vulnerable figure, my heart compelling me onward. As I struck harder, the air crackled with energy, the force shattering the remaining darkness around us. I could feel light enveloping my senses, embracing me as if long-lost warmth had finally returned. But just as hope flickered brighter inside, I felt the ground beneath me shift violently. The floor cracked, splintering open to reveal a dark abyss waiting below. My heart raced as I stumbled backward, realizing the entity wasn't defeated yet. The shadows coalesced one last time, pulling together into a massive whirlpool that began to pull everything toward it, threatening to drag us all into the depths once more. I staggered, struggling to maintain my ground as the room trembled with raw energy. "No!" I screamed, fighting against the force pulling at me. The spirits flitted nervously, their light flickering as they surrounded me, urging me to fight against the dreadful wave closing in. Drawing from every ounce of strength and light, I raised the knife again. "You will not take me," I declared, forcing the shadows back as I plunged the blade into the ground once more, channeling every spark of courage I had into this final stand. Light burst forth, a brilliant explosion that filled the room. It pushed back against the overwhelming darkness, illuminating everything in a radiant glow. The shadows roared but began to whirl away, dispersed by a powerful surge of energy. But just when I thought victory was near, the shadows lashed out one last time, roaring in fury as they congealed into a grotesque form. It drew nearer, eyes gleaming with malicious intent, and with one terrible scream, the figure lunged towards me, hands outstretched, a dark figure ready to consume. In that instant, I realized that this confrontation would determine not just my future, but the fate of countless souls caught in this relentless struggle. With the weight of everything pressing down, I steeled myself for the fight of my life, ready to confront the darkness that still gripped the edges of my world. In that instant, I realized that this confrontation would determine not just my future, but the fate of countless souls caught in this relentless struggle. The figure lunged at me, a dark shadow twisting in the air, its reach stretching impossibly long as if it had no end. Panic surged through me, and I could feel every heartbeat pounding in my ears like a war drum. With a primal scream, I dodged to the side, the air slicing past me as its claws grazed my shoulder. Instinct kicked in, and without thinking, I rolled away, desperately putting space between us. But the darkness pressed in closer. Every corner of the room seemed to pulse with dread, as if the very walls themselves were whispering my fears. I scrambled to my feet, the knife trembling in my grip. The light around me flickered ominously, forcing me to wonder if it was growing weaker, or if the shadows were growing bolder. I caught a glimpse of the creature's face, half-formed and twisting in rage, its eyes like hollow pits of despair. I could feel its icy breath on the back of my neck, chilling me to the core. "You think you can escape?" It hissed, its voice a low growl that resonated in my bones. You cannot hide from the darkness inside you. With every word it spoke, I felt my doubts bubbling to the surface. Memories of past failures flooded my mind, whispers of every time I'd felt powerless or afraid. Shadows darted around the room, coiling tighter, forming grotesque figures that taunted me. I could sense their dread, echoing through the ages, their cries resonating with the darkness that clung to me like a shroud. Drawing in a deep breath, I forced myself to focus. The spirits flickered around me, urging me to stand firm. I couldn't let them down. I had to fight back. I aimed the knife at the creature and shouted, "You will not take me. I am more than what you say." The figure paused, a flicker of surprise crossing its features, and in that moment, I lunged forward, plunging the knife toward its heart. But my blade met only shadow, the creature dissolving into mist and swirling around me. I gasped, stumbling as the darkness enveloped my ankles, dragging me closer to the ground. I fought against the weight, pulling with all my might, but it was like trying to move through molasses. The creature cackled, its laughter echoing in the air, filling me with further dread. "You can't escape your fate," it taunted, the shadows pulling tighter, wrapping around me like a serpent squeezing its prey. Desperation clawed at my insides. I couldn't let it win. I pushed back, feeling the light within me flickering, battling against the dark tide. "I will remember," I shouted, summoning memories of hope and courage. A flickering flame against the suffocating darkness. The shadows wavered for a split second. Encased in the darkness, I reached deep inside myself, gathering strength like a fire igniting. The warmth began to spread, reaching out to the spirits surrounding me. "Together," I cried, feeling their energy surge into me, igniting my resolve. With a sudden burst of energy, I flung my arms out wide and shouted, feeling the light swell within me. I was not alone. I had the willpower of everyone who had come before me, drawing upon their strength too. A brilliant flash erupted as I pushed the knife into the ground again, channeling the energy flowing through me. The figure shrieked, a sound of anguish that shattered the thick atmosphere. The shadows jerked away from me like flames from water, their grip loosening as the light pushed back the encroaching darkness. I could see the creature falter, its form shifting and trembling in the vibrant glow, the anger in its eyes mingling with fear. But before I could celebrate, the shadows began to swirl, coalescing into a vortex above me. The room trembled violently, the air thickening with a sense of impending doom. I staggered back, heart racing as I tried to comprehend what was happening now. From the swirling mass, new shapes began to emerge, faces twisted in despair, shadows mocking my every effort. I felt an icy grip settle in my stomach as one of the figures lunged at me. A former victim of the darkness transformed into a wretched soul, its eyes filled with rage. The creature surrounded me, whispering my deepest secrets and fears, drowning me in doubts I thought I had conquered. "You'll never escape from this," they all cried, their voices overlapping, creating a chilling symphony of despair that echoed within my mind. I stumbled as the visions overwhelmed me, a torrent of memories crashing over me. Nightmares replayed in excruciating detail, the moments of isolation, the deep sadness that made me question my worth. I could feel the ground shifting beneath me, the shadows pulling at my resolve, trying to tear apart the light I had fought so hard to build. Holding tightly to the knife, I closed my eyes for a moment, focusing on the warmth of the spirits, their gentle reminders of strength. "You are not alone," they whispered, their voices cutting through the darkness like a beacon. I opened my eyes, determination flooding through me once more. "Enough!" I shouted, feeling every ounce of despair push against me. Yet I stood firm, channeling the energy that surrounded me. I directed all my pain and fear back toward the swirling shadows, forcing them back. As the light surged from my heart, the figures shrieked, an anguished sound that threatened to overwhelm me. I felt a fierce rage boil within me, a fire igniting through every fiber of my being. I would not be a victim any longer. "Leave me!" I roared, thrusting the knife deep into the ground, releasing a wave of incandescent light that surged forth. The shadows shrieked as they were thrown back, disintegrating before my eyes. A cascade of darkness spilled like ink, losing their hold. But just as I thought I had victory in my grasp, a figure emerged again, larger and more sinister than before. Its eyes burned with molten anger, and I felt despair wash over me anew. "You can't win," it hissed, its voice like gravel scraping against glass. "I will always return." I was losing ground again, my heart racing as it lunged for me. I had to move, to stand my ground, but fear gripped me like a vice. The thoughts of the past crept in, the doubt forcing its way back into my mind. But then, I remembered the spirits. They were still there, circling around me, whispering words of encouragement. I drew strength from them, pushing aside the creeping fear. "You may come back," I yelled, not backing down. "But I will fight every time." I plunged the knife into the ground again, channeling all my energy into a final strike. Bright light exploded outward, breaking through the darkness like dawn piercing through the night. The creature howled in agony, its form shattering into nothingness. But just as hope flickered, the ground beneath me cracked wider. I fell to my knees, heart dropping as dark tendrils surged towards me, rising once more from the depths below. "You cannot escape," they hissed, clawing at my ankles like hungry beasts, ready to drag me into the yawning abyss. I scrambled to stand, knowing I had but seconds before they would close in on me. The spirits swirled faster, their light flickering with urgency, trying to stave off the darkness. I gripped the knife tightly, determination flooding through me. "I will not surrender," I shouted defiantly. As the shadows rose, blocking my vision, I summoned every shred of light left within me. "You are nothing without fear," I declared, my voice steady as I lunged forward one last time, hoping to pierce the heart of the encroaching darkness. "No," the darkness screamed, the mixture of souls forming into a terrifying visage one last time, as if to remind me of every fear I had ever faced. "You cannot win this battle, and you will always be mine." In that moment, I knew I stood on the edge of something critical. I could feel the weight of countless souls pressing against me, the darkness threatening to swallow every last bit of light I had within. The shadows coiled tighter, refusing to let go. But just as I felt myself slipping away, I took a deep breath, steadied my grip on the knife, and remembered the strength I had gained. I would not let it end this way. I would fight until my last breath, standing tall against the shadows, determined to push back against the tide. As I plunged the knife forward, I channeled all the light inside me into a single powerful thrust. "I am not afraid," I cried out, my heart racing with defiance. And in that moment, every spirit, every ounce of strength I had fought to protect surged forth, exploding in a radiant blast that illuminated the darkness completely. I felt the shadowy presence shriek, a cacophony of fear swallowed by the brilliant light as it shattered around me. But what would happen next? Would the darkness truly be vanquished, or was this merely a temporary retreat? I couldn't shake the feeling that something more significant loomed just beyond the threshold, waiting for its chance to strike. As the light fizzled and the shadows thinned, a heavy silence replaced the cacophony of screams. But it felt wrong, like the calm before a storm. I stood there, heart pounding, straining to hear any sound, but all I got was the unsettling echo of my own breath resonating in the stillness. Then I had a chilling feeling creep over me, the sensation of being watched. I turned slowly, scanning the space around me, but all I saw were remnants of darkness twisting and curling away. Where had the creature gone? It was as if it had vanished into thin air, but deep down, I knew it was still lurking nearby, waiting for the right moment to strike again. Suddenly, a cold wind swept through the chamber, extinguishing what little light remained. Darkness surged back, thick and suffocating, wrapping around me like a heavy blanket. I could hear the low whispering again, swirling through the air like smoke. "Foolish child," it hissed. "You think you can sever the ties of your past?" Panicking, I stumbled backward, desperate to escape the encroaching shadows. As I did, I caught a glimpse of movement in the darkness. Dark shapes darted in and out of view, mocking me as I desperately sought an escape. Every creak of the floorboards felt like a groan from the depths of hell, and I fought to control my racing heart, the insistent pounding echoing louder in my ears. "Face what you fear most," the whisper called, taunting me, drawing out my deepest insecurities. I felt like a puppet tangled in strings, each shadow a memory pulling me back in a deeper despair. Just then, a shadow loomed larger than the rest, forming a figure too familiar for comfort. It coalesced into a shadowed version of myself, twisted and distorted, with eyes hollow and black. "You think you're brave, but look closer," my shadow self sneered, its voice cold and mocking. "Every time you feel hope, I will be here, reminding you of all your failures." Grief washed over me, for the shadows were not just monsters. They were reflections of everything I tried to bury. The room seemed to close in around me, the walls cracking, as if they were just as tormented as I was. "You can't escape me," it echoed, the words clawing at my mind, trying to pull me into despair. I fought back with all my might, shaking my head violently. "No, I won't let you take me," I shouted, gripping the knife tightly, its cool metal a reminder of strength. But the figure before me only grinned wider, showing teeth that dripped with malice. With one swift movement, it lunged at me, a blur of darkness and despair. Panic surged through me as I sidestepped, narrowly escaping its grasp. But just then, the shadows thickened around me, and I realized they were no longer just specters of my mind. They were real and pressing in from all sides. The air grew colder, and I could feel the icy breath of the shadows wrapping around my ankles. "You're trapped," the voices hissed. I stumbled back against the wall, but instead of the solid structure, my hand met a cold, fleshy surface. Shock raced through me as I looked down to see a mass of shadowy hands reaching up, grasping for my legs. I tried to pull away, but they held tight, anchoring me in place. The shadows whispered sweet lies in my ear, manipulating my thoughts. "You will always belong here, in darkness," they purred, their voices sultry yet unsettling. "Let go of your fight. Give in." A chill ran down my spine, trying to convince me that surrendering was the easiest way out. My heart raced as panic clawed at my chest, the stifling grasp of despair squeezing tighter and tighter. But deep inside, a flicker of defiance burned bright. I could not give in. I had fought too hard to let them win. Drawing on every ounce of strength, I raised the knife high, feeling the weight of every breath, every moment that led me to this fight. "I choose light," I called out, voice steady despite the mounting fear. In that instant, a blinding light burst forth from the blade, illuminating the space around me. The shadow hands recoiled, shrieking in unison as the light pushed back against the suffocating darkness. I could feel the grip on my legs loosening, the whispers fading into horrified cries. But just as I felt the tide beginning to shift, I heard a low growl rumbling in the depths of the darkness, a sound promising devastating retribution. The shadows twisted violently, swirling into a vortex that rose with menacing tendrils, eager to reclaim what they almost lost. From the center of this chaos, the creature reformed, expanding larger than before, a grotesque giant that bore no resemblance to the twisted figure I fought earlier. Its presence felt suffocating, an impenetrable wall of intimidation that threatened to crush me beneath its weight. "Do you really think you can banish me?" It seethed, voice dripping with venom. "You are nothing without your shadows." I fell back, terror flooding my veins as the realization struck me. This creature fed on my fear. For every victory I thought I won, it grew stronger, adapting to my struggles, learning my weaknesses. Heart racing, I forced myself to stand firm, grip tightening around the knife. The air thickened as whirlwinds of dark energy encircled me, threatening to snuff out the light I had fought so hard to harness. I felt the weight of despair pressing in, whispering doubts, each taunt more cutting than the last. Visions of the shadows ensnaring me flooded my mind, but I refused to let them crush my spirit. As the creature lunged towards me again, I ducked and rolled, the wind of its movement barely missing. "Me! You can't hide," it snarled as I regained my footing. "You belong to me." The taunts echoed through the chamber, wrapping around me like chains, trying to draw me back into suffocating darkness. Desperation coursed through me as I looked around, searching for anything that could work in my favor. The spirits had faded into the background, their presence now but a whisper of light. "Where are you?" I pleaded silently, fear clawing at my insides as I felt more alone than ever. Suddenly, a glimmer caught my eye from across the room. A small orb of wispy light hovering lightly, flickering and pulsing as if trying to break free from its own bindings. My heart leapt at the possibility, and without a second thought, I sprinted toward it, feeling the shadows clawing at my ankles again. As I reached for the light, I felt a surge of hope rising within me, the warmth wrapping around my fingers. It shone brighter the closer I got, illuminating the space as if it were recognizing my need. The creature roared in fury, its eyes locking onto the light, now realizing that it would lose its grip if I succeeded. Grabbing the tiny orb with both hands, I felt an electric jolt surge through my body. It connected with me, pouring warmth and clarity into my veins, compelling me to remember my strength. I could feel the memories of every time I stood tall against adversity flooding back, reminding me of the light within that refused to fade. "Together, we fight," I shouted, holding the orb high above my head. The shadows screamed, the sound filling the air with palpable terror. I could feel the creature shift, its form trembling as it faced the increasing light. But just then, a massive wave of darkness surged forward, crashing against me like a monstrous tide, threatening to engulf me completely. I fought against it, pushing with all my might, feeling the light pulse as it absorbed the very shadows that sought to destroy me. As the darkness pressed against me, another whisper reached my ears, a familiar voice from the depths of my mind. "Fight back. The real battle is within." With renewed vigor, I plunged the knife into the ground, directing the combined energy of the orb and my own strength into a brilliant beam of light. The shadows writhed and shrieked, desperately trying to pull away from the intensity. "Enough!" I cried, my heart racing with determination. The shadows recoiled, but not without retaliation, lashing out in anger. I could feel their claws tearing at my essence, but the light pushed back harder, enveloping me in warmth and courage. The dark figure screamed, its voice filled with fury as the light swelled larger. "You cannot escape me," it bellowed, but the sound began to waver, tremble, and ultimately fade, lost amidst the brilliance I unleashed. But I knew this wasn't over. Not yet. There was still a part of me that felt like a string was being pulled taut, ready to snap the moment I let my guard down. I prepared myself, expecting it would fight back, but a new feeling washed over me. A sense of impending dread pushed into my chest. Suddenly, with one final roaring cry, the creature lunged, darker than ever, and I braced for the impact. I would not let my light waver. I clenched my teeth, heart racing in defiance as shadows surged around my body, bearing down with all their power. I could feel the weight of the entire universe pressing against me, ready to crush any sense of hope I had left. Yet, I stood still, gripping the orb of light with everything I had. As it pulsed, the echo of lost souls mixed in, their whispers urging me to survive, breathe, fight. In that moment, I realized my battle was not just against the creature, but against the shadows within me. The air crackled with tension, a thick sense of despair wrapping around my chest like a vice. Each heartbeat echoed louder in my ears, almost drowning out the shrieks of the dark being before me. I could see its form ripple, a wave of darkness rolling beneath its surface, shifting and swirling like a storm ready to unleash its fury. The creature lunged at me, its maw opening wide, revealing rows of teeth dripping with a thick, dark sludge. I barely dodged its swipe, the shadows slicing through the air, just missing my skin. As I stumbled back, I felt the cold dampness on my arms, a reminder of its sinister nature, and I realized it wasn't just the creature I was facing, but the fears that had plagued me for so long. "Your past is with you," it growled, voice a low rumble that caused the ground to shudder beneath me. "It will always be part of you. You can't erase it." Every word pierced like iron. I felt the weight of regret pressing down on me, memories flooding into my mind. The times I felt weak, the moments I turned away from who I wanted to be, each recollection sharpened by the darkness that surrounded me. I shook my head violently to dispel the thoughts, reminding myself I had fought to stand here, that I didn't have to be captured by those memories. With a newfound ferocity, I focused on the orb. Its light pulsed in time with my heartbeat, becoming a rhythm of hope that thrummed through me. "I will not succumb to you," I shouted, trying to drown out the creature's taunts. I felt warmth radiating from the orb, illuminating the shadows that threatened to close in once more. But the creature was relentless. It roared, dark tendrils reaching out, trying to wrap around me like a twisted embrace, threatening to pull me away from the light. I had to act quickly. I raised the orb high, willing its light to shine brighter, pushing back against the tide of darkness that swarmed toward me. As the light expanded, the creature hissed, its form contorting in agony as the light seared through its darkness. For a fleeting moment, the shadows receded, revealing glimpses of the room around me, filled with forgotten artifacts long buried by time. I caught sight of a cracked mirror standing against the wall, its once clear surface now a swirling mass of black and gray. Curiosity tugged at me, and I could not resist. I moved toward it, feeling an inexplicable urge to look deeper, to find whatever lay hidden there. My heart pounded as I approached, the creature's growls echoing in the background, a haunting anthem of impending doom. As I peered into the mirror, the glass rippled like a pond disturbed by a stone. What I saw sent a chill down my spine. Reflections of myself flickered through time, distorted images from my past. I saw the shy child standing alone on a playground, the beginner trembling at the piano, the teen haunted by anxiety. Each image sent a fresh wave of dread crashing over me. The creature seized the moment, using my distraction to unleash a lethal wave of shadows. I felt them engulf me, cold and suffocating. Despair clawed at my throat, threatening to swallow me whole as darkness closed in around my throat, a chilling reminder of every doubt I had ever known. "See how easy it is for you to drown?" It taunted, its breath cold against my skin. But a fire ignited within me as I thought of the warmth from the orb. With a fierce defiance, I slammed my fist against the mirror, shattering the illusion that haunted me. Glass shattered, fragments flying everywhere, sparkling like stars in the oppressive dark. But instead of fear, I felt a rush of freedom. The brightness of the orb surged, pushing through the darkness like a beacon guiding me home. "You are nothing without my fears," I yelled, letting the energy from every memory surround me. I channeled the pain, heartache, and the fleeting moments of courage, pouring them into the glow. As the creature recoiled, I thrust the orb towards it, a surge of light erupting outward, illuminating every crevice and shadow in its path. I could see the creature writhe, its long twisted limbs flailing wildly, desperate to escape. The walls shook, and all the shadows trembled at my command. But I knew this was the climax, the ultimate face-off. I held the light steady as the dark figure collapsed inward, its sinister whispers replaced by deafening cries of rage. "You think you've won," it roared, rage spilling from its lips like venom. "I will always be here, hidden in the shadows, waiting for you to let your guard down." I felt a knot form in my stomach, but I pushed it away. I had to believe that I could conquer this, that the shadows didn't define me. The light surged again, burning brighter than before, forcing the creature back with each pulse. In a final moment of clarity, I made a decision driven by the raw power building within me. I am not alone, I cried out, as the orb exploded into a brilliant cascade of light, showering the room in luminous brilliance. The shadows screamed, twisting and writhing as the light snuffed them out, one by one, until only the creature remained, now reduced to a trembling mass of darkness. I felt an overwhelming sense of victory coursing through my veins, the orb's energy humming with a fierce resolve. I had pushed back the darkness, but as I looked down at the remnants of shadows scattered across the floor, I knew that this battle was only a prelude to many more. Suddenly, a sharp chill washed over me, and I turned to find the twisted form pulling itself together again, darker than before. "You think you can rid yourself of me?" It hissed, its voice a venomous whisper that curled around my soul. "You will always carry my shadows. You cannot escape who you are." I swallowed hard, feeling doubt creeping in once more. But then I felt the warmth of the light deep within, a reminder of my strength. "You have no hold over me," I said firmly, determination filling my voice. "You can't define me. I define myself." As I rallied my strength, I focused on the memories that fueled my fire, moments of laughter, love, and triumph. They surged within me, creating a whirlwind of energy that mingled with the light. I raised the orb high once more, letting its brilliance shine like a sun breaking through the darkest night. With a deliberate motion, I plunged the orb toward the desolate shadow, sending a wave of light crashing against it. The creature shrieked, the sound piercing through the air, a cacophony of pure rage as its form shattered under the brilliant force. The room trembled as the shadows swirled, dissipating into thin air, but just before the last echoes of their chaos faded, a single, chilling whisper lingered in the air. "You are never truly free," it resonated, leaving an unsettling chill in my heart. I stood there panting, feeling the emptiness around me. The walls felt less threatening, yet an apprehension lingered, a sense that something still lurked beneath the surface. I had pushed the shadows back, but the darkness always knows how to hide. I had won this battle, but I also knew that the fight against my fears was far from over. I took a wary step forward, heart still racing, aware that the remnants of the darkness might strike again when I least expected it. The orb flickered in my hands, a reminder of my strength, but also a warning of what might follow. As I moved cautiously through the now luminous room, memories shimmered like ghostly apparitions, promising more trials ahead. And in the quiet, lingering echoes of defeat and victory, I felt a haunting truth settle deep within me. The shadows would always be there, waiting, patient, hiding in the corners of my mind, ready to rise again when I showed any sign of weakness. And so I pressed on, unsure of what lay ahead, but determined to face whatever demons came my way, knowing that I would keep fighting, light in hand. The air buzzed with an uneasy energy as I took each step forward. The remnants of the darkness swirled around the room like a thick fog, casting strange shadows that danced on the walls. They moved in ways that twisted my heart, as if the darkness remembered its former self and aimed to remind me of what I had just fought against. I felt myself holding my breath, ears straining for any sounds amid the silence. Every small creak of wood and rustle of fabric took on a menacing quality, sending jitters through my body. With every heartbeat, I could almost hear my fear whispering in my mind, cautioning me to turn back. But I wouldn't let it win so easily. Suddenly, a low growl emerged from the far corner of the room. I froze, my pulse quickening as the shadows thickened, drawing together in a mass that seemed to pulse with a life of its own. I squinted into the dimness, trying to see what lurked just beyond the edge of the fading light. My heart raced as I felt a chill creeping up my spine. As if in response to my fear, the shadow morphed, taking on a form that sent a wave of terror crashing through me. It became an amalgamation of all my past fears, a twisted version of myself that bore my insecurities on its ghostly surface. Its eyes were hollow voids, reflecting back the torment of every moment I struggled with my identity. Every time I felt lost, every doubt I ever had. "Look at what you are," it sneered, its voice a jagged whisper that curled around my thoughts, attempting to pull me into despair. "You can't escape your truth. You've tried, but I am always here." Memories began flooding back, each creeping in like a fog that wrapped around my legs, anchoring me to the ground. I was standing in front of a crowd, the whispers echoing back. "You're not good enough." I screamed internally. I couldn't be drawn back in. I shook my head, trying to dispel the shadows clawing at my mind. "I will not let you control me," I shouted, my voice trembling but resolute. The ghostly figure lunged forward with a speed that caught me off guard. I barely managed to dodge, stumbling to the side as it passed through where I had just been standing. Its cold energy sent chills down my arms, a stark reminder of its power. I rolled back to my feet, pulse pounding furiously, desperate to find a way to fight it off. With a surge of determination, I focused on the light, willing it to grow stronger. The orb pulsed in response. A warm glow radiated from my palms, filling the air with a sense of safety. I could feel its energy, a flickering flame within me that pushed against the enveloping cold. "You don't own me?" I yelled, lifting the orb again, channeling all my fears into its brilliant light. But just as I thought I had regained control, the shadows began rising from the ground again, creating long, claw-like fingers reaching out towards me. I could hear the rustling of indistinct whispers, words twisting together in a cacophony of doubt and dread. The room felt smaller, the air thick and oppressive as the shadows began to swirl around me, forming a tight circle that threatened to choke the light back into nothingness. "You are weak. You will always be weak," the figure hissed, its voice echoing through the haze. I felt the truth of those words seep into my mind, doubt nesting in my thoughts like a parasite. It strained against the light, eager to pull me back into the depths from which I fought so hard to escape. In a moment of panic, I glanced down at the orb, urging it to illuminate everything around me. As if reading my thoughts, it expanded outward, casting a brilliant glow. The light pushed against the darkness, splint, airing it into fragments that drifted apart like ash in the wind. But the shadows regrouped quickly, reforming near my feet, trying to wrap around my ankles, pulling me back again. "Face what you fear, or you will forever be trapped," it snarled, a deep rumble that felt like thunder in my chest. I focused on pushing back, feeling a surge of anger rise inside me. Anger at the creature that embodied every fear. Anger at the memories that continued to haunt me. "You are not the sum of your fears," I shouted defiantly, feeling the light inside me intensify. As if my words had a physical impact, the orb responded with a violent pulse, pushing the shadows further away. The figure shrieked, losing its form and slipping back into the darkness that formed around me. But in its retreat, I noticed the shadows forming something else. Faces, lost expressions casting their gaze of accusation upon me. It was the ghost of every moment I tried to forget, every word taunting me and reminding me of my failures. The shadow faces cried out in unison, their voices blending into a haunting song that stirred the air, filling it with dread. "You are alone. You will always be alone," they echoed, each word wrapping around my heart like a noose. In that moment, I felt the stranglehold of despair tightening around me. "No!" I screamed, shaking my head violently, trying to rid myself of the suffocating fear. Suddenly, the room lurched, and I found myself falling into a void of darkness, tumbled by unseen hands that clawed at me. I landed hard on the ground, the air knocked from my lungs, and felt the light flicker and wane as the shadows closed in once again. I looked around in a panic, feeling the cold creeping back with every second I spent on the ground. The once warm glow now felt distant, flickering like a dying candle under a relentless wind. For a moment, I doubted if I could recover. I could feel the weight of the darkness pressing down all around me, the whispers growing louder, creeping under my skin like a chilling breeze. But in the depths of my heart, a flicker of hope remained. I scrambled back up to my feet, grasping the orb tightly, and I called upon every bit of strength I had left. "You will not take me," I shouted, voice filled with determination. To my surprise, the orb reacted strongly, bursting with renewed vigor as if fueled by my refusal to give in. The light exploded outward, illuminating every corner of the room with a blinding radiance that forced the tendrils of darkness to shriek and snap back, banishing them far into the shadows. Gaining my bearings, I realized I had a corridor stretching out behind me, its entrance illuminated by the same golden light. An eerie stillness washed over me as the shadows retreated. I could feel the weight of the specters fading, but I knew they were not gone. They were only waiting in the dark corners, begrudgingly watching my fight. With hesitation, I stepped into the corridor, my heart hammering in my chest. The walls around me shimmered, lined with shadows that whispered reminders of my fears. The air felt charged with an unsettling energy, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something awaited me at the end of the path. Something even darker than the figures before. As I walked further, the light from my orb flickered sporadically, creating an ominous atmosphere. The hall twisted and turned, revealing old, cracked portraits hanging on the walls, faces distorted and grotesque, watching me with hollow eyes. They seemed to beckon me closer, their whispers becoming louder. "Join us. You belong to the darkness." Each step forward felt heavier, as if the very shadows conspired to pull me back into their suffocating embrace. The corridor felt endless, stretching out before me like an abyss, and the weight of the darkness seemed to grasp at my ankles, dragging me down with every agonizing moment. But I pressed on, fueled by the flickering light and my determination. Everything around me felt haunted. Objects swayed and creaked like a ship caught in a storm. When I thought I could see the end of the corridor shimmering ahead, a guttural growl echoed behind me, sending icy shivers down my spine. I turned slowly, terrified of what I might find. The shadows were pooling together, forming a massive, clawed hand that reached toward me. My heart dropped, and panic surged through every part of me. "Not again!" I gasped, flinging the orb in front of me as a shield against the oncoming darkness. The light washed over the creature, and at that moment, it felt like time froze. I could see its face morphing, shifting back into the twisted vision of myself, the figment of my own despair. "You can't escape me," it screeched, a cacophony of voices echoing all around, each one a reminder of my deepest, darkest fears. But I refused to let it take over. I gathered every ounce of resolve, feeling the warmth of the orb engulf me, pulling me back from the edge of surrender. "I am not what you say," I shouted, directing the brilliant light towards the creature. It howled in rage, the sound pulsating through the corridor, a haunting melody that reverberated in my very core. Shadows erupted all around, but I stood my ground, refusing to let the darkness consume me. I could feel the fissures forming in the reality around me, the walls starting to bend. As the light expanded, the shadows writhed and twisted, caught in an eternal struggle against the oncoming brightness. I could feel pieces of the darkness falling away, revealing glimpses of my past, good, joyful moments hidden beneath layers of fear and doubt. Through the chaos, a memory emerged, laughter echoing on a sunny day, a feeling of love and belonging. It surged through me like a powerful tide, a reminder that the light had always been there, waiting for me to recognize it. With newfound clarity, I focused on that memory. I let it fuel the orb, sending a wave of vibrant energy crashing against the dark figure. It screeched, a sound that shook my core, as the shadows began to tremble with every pulse of light. And just then I felt it, the fleeting hope that I could win this battle, that maybe I could face down my fears and emerge stronger. The light erupted in a dazzling explosion, a burst of brilliance that shattered the darkness all around me. I took a step forward, and with it, the shadows disintegrated, evaporating into thin air, replaced by the warmth of clarity and strength. I felt liberated as I stepped into the breach, a powerful force emanating within me. And yet, the lingering feeling of unease trailed behind me. I stood there, breathing heavily, aware that while this battle was over, there were more trials ahead. I had faced the shadows of my past, but the path to true freedom felt far from complete. There were still depths within, the ones I had yet to explore, the darkness that might return when I dropped my guard. But with the warm glow of the orb still pulsing at my side, I reminded myself, no longer would I allow the darkness to define me. With every step, I would forge a new path, one filled with light, ever ready to confront whatever haunting nightmares dared to rise again. Armed with my memories and the strength they gave me, I took a deep breath and moved forward into the unknown, ready to face whatever darkness might still await me. As I continued down the corridor, the air grew thicker, almost alive, wrapping around me like a tight, cold blanket. The walls shifted, flickering between shadows and light, as if they were alive. I knew the fight wasn't over. A feeling gnawed at my insides, telling me that I was being watched. Each step echoed eerily, a reminder that I was not alone. The silence around me became oppressive, filled with a tension that made my skin crawl. Suddenly, I stumbled upon an old wooden door, half open, its hinges creaking softly as if inviting me in. A cold breeze slipped through, carrying whispers that tickled my ears, beckoning me to explore what lay beyond. I hesitated, but my curiosity overtook my fear. I pushed the door wider, the dull thud of wood against wood reverberating in the stillness. The room inside was shrouded in shadows, barely illuminated by the flickering light from the orb in my hand. Dust hung in the air, swirling like tiny specters in the faint glow. Old furniture loomed in the dim light, covered in white sheets like forgotten memories waiting to be uncovered. Taking a cautious step inside, I felt a wave of dread wash over me. I caught a glimpse of a dusty, old mirror leaning against the wall. It was tarnished, the glass foggy, as if it held secrets from another time. My heart hammered in my chest. I knew mirrors had a way of revealing what lies beneath. I almost turned to leave, a sense of self-preservation kicking in, but something kept me rooted to the spot. The whispers grew louder, swirling around me, spinning tales of lost souls and forgotten dreams. The mirror began to shimmer, its surface writhing like a living thing. I felt compelled to look closer. With a deep breath, I stepped forward, feeling the chill radiating from the glass. As my reflection appeared, I was taken aback. It was not solely my own face staring back, but twisted, shadowy versions of myself, contorted in distress. They mouthed silent screams, their eyes pleading, echoing my own fears and insecurities. The sight sent a shiver down my spine, and I stepped back, but the mirror called out to me, its surface rippling like water. I could see flashes of my past, the moments of loneliness, the rejections, the haunting reminders that had clawed at me over the years. Each face in the mirror held sharp expressions of pain and doubt, and I felt their sorrow seep into my own heart. "I am not you," I shouted, my voice trembling as I tried to fight against the compelling force of the reflections. A dark energy began to spread from the edges of the mirror, crawling up the walls like ink spilling from a tipped bottle. The room grew darker, and I could hear the echoes of my whispers fading into chilling laughter, mocking me as I stood there. Suddenly, I felt hands gripping my shoulders from behind. My breath caught in my throat as I turned sharply, but there was nothing there. The laughter intensified, a haunting chorus that filled the room, and shadows twisted around me, trying to pull me into the depths of despair. My heart raced as I searched for a way out, desperately trying to quell the rising panic. I looked back at the mirror, realizing I needed to confront this ancient magic. With each pulse of the orb, I could feel the warmth battling the cold that sought to pull me down into hopelessness. I raised the orb high, letting its light flow through me, surrounding me in a protective bubble. The shadows writhed, screaming as the light scorched their twisted forms, and the mirror began to crack, breaking the spell that held me captive. I felt the grip of darkness falter, but it wasn't done yet. From the depths of the mirror, a figure emerged. I could barely recognize it, a distortion of my own face and form, eyes dark and soulless. "Why do you fight?" it hissed, its voice unfurling like smoke around me. "You are nothing without your fears. Embrace me, and you shall be free." My heart raced as the creature came closer, each step sending a chill through my spine. The room trembled as my reflection loomed, claws extending as if to drag me back into the despair it represented. "I am not afraid of you," I yelled, channeling all my defiance. The orb flared brightly, blossoming with energy as I thrust it toward the creature. The light clashed with the darkness, exploding in a shower of sparks as I focused on the moments that made me strong. The love from friends, the joy of victory, the dreams I held dear. With a thunderous roar, the creature howled, disintegrating into fragments of shadow that scattered like leaves in a storm. The mirror cracked wider, splintering under the pressure of the light. I felt the shadows retreat, pulling away into the corners, desperately trying to hide from the radiance that engulfed the room. But as I turned to leave, a chill swept through the air, seeping deep into my bones. I could sense the darkness gathering, regrouping with malicious intent. I didn't have much time. I rushed back to the door, heart pounding with urgency. But as I reached for the handle, shadows shot up from the floor, wrapping around my wrists, pulsing with a life of their own. "Where do you think you're going?" they hissed, their voice 1,000 whispers woven together. I felt the cold seep in, a suffocating grip that threatened my light. I tried to fight, yanking my hands free, but their hold became tighter, darker, dragging me downward. "I won't let you take me," I shouted, drawing from the light still glowing at my side. With a burst of energy, I blasted the light outward, trying to sever the shadow's grip. The shadows recoiled, but their fingers tightened, drawing closer, eager to swallow me whole. Suddenly, the room began to shake. I could feel the very foundation tremble as shadows bent and twisted, angry at my defiance. The walls started to crack, fissures spiderwebbing across the surface as the darkness grew more frenzied, more powerful, like a creature scorned. The whispers escalated into wails, drowning out my thoughts. I could see forms shifting just beyond the edges of the light, sinister shapes drawing nearer, their mouths curling into wicked grins. One figure stood out, the largest hidden among the smaller shadows. It had a presence that demanded attention, its eyes piercing through the chaos. I felt a chill creep down my spine. This wasn't just the remnants of my fears anymore. What stood before me was a manifestation of something far more malevolent, a darkness that thrived on despair. "You cannot escape the inevitable," it taunted, voice low and slithering around me like mist. "I will claim you as my own." Just then, the ground beneath me cracked open, revealing a chasm filled with swirling shadows that beckoned me down into their depths. The very air vibrated around the rift, pulsing with a dark, hungry energy that promised to consume everything in its path, including me. My breath quickened as I fought against the pull of the shadows, remembering my own strength and the light within. But the force was overwhelming. I stumbled back, gazing into the abyss. If I fell in, I would be lost forever. Everything I had fought against would win. With a final surge of bravery, I lifted the orb high, feeling the heat of its glow intensify around me. "I am not your prey," I yelled, determination boiling in my veins. "I will not let you win." As the light expanded, a brilliant wave crashed against the darkness, illuminating the chasm, forcing the shadows to retreat for now. I could feel the vibrations weaken, the pull of the abyss becoming less urgent. But as I stood there, surrounded by the light, I knew this was only a temporary reprieve. The giant shadow writhed, furious, its howls echoing like thunder. "You think you have one? You will always be mine. I will return," it screamed, its voice cutting through the air like a sharpened blade. I felt uncertainty flicker inside me, questions about survival blooming in my mind. Yet I refused to give in. I turned back toward the corridor, the light still clinging to me like a protective shield against the encroaching darkness. Each step felt like a victory, but I knew better. The darkness was relentless. It would come again, waiting for the moment I faltered, waiting for the light to dim. I had to be ready. With my heart pounding, I pressed onward, knowing that I had escaped, but that the ultimate battle was still waiting just around the corner, lurking in the shadows, eager for the next chance to strike. I pressed onward, knowing that I had escaped, but that the ultimate battle was still waiting just around the corner, lurking in the shadows, eager for the next chance to strike. As I moved deeper into the corridor, I felt a change in the air. The warm light from the orb flickered, and I noticed the walls begin to pulse, almost like they were breathing. The shadows that clung to the corners seemed to grow bolder. They swirled around my feet, reaching up as if testing the light. Each brush against my skin felt like icy fingers caressing my ankles, sending a shiver through me. With every step I took, the whispers returned, more insistent this time. They seeped into my mind, swirling around my thoughts, becoming an incessant hum. "You cannot escape," they taunted softly. "You will always be lost." I fought to keep moving. I couldn't let them get inside my head again. Then I reached a door at the end of the corridor. It was old, wood-worn and weathered, with strange symbols etched into its surface. My heart raced as I reached for the handle. The moment my fingers touched it, I felt a rush of cold, like a jolt of fear shooting through my veins. A low growl reverberated behind me, deep and threatening, making the hairs on the back of my neck stand on end. I turned, expecting the giant shadow to reappear, but instead, the corridor lay still. Taking a deep breath, I pushed the door open. It creaked loudly, as if it had not been disturbed in ages. Beyond it lay a small room, lit only by the dim glow of my orb. Cobwebs draped from the ceiling, and dust coated everything like a thick layer of forgotten memories. In the center of the room stood a rusted iron table, its surface covered in strange objects. There were jagged stones, wilted flowers, and tiny, twisted figurines that seemed to watch me with hollow eyes. The air felt charged, prickling against my skin as if something powerful had once taken place here. I approached the table cautiously, curiosity battling my instincts to run. The closer I got, the more I sensed a presence looming above me, heavy and watchful. Suddenly, the floorboards creaked loudly behind me. I turned quickly. There was nothing there, only darkness pressing close. The shadows flickered around the doorframe, almost as if they were alive, writhing and stretching, hungry for my light. My heart thundered in my chest, but I was determined. I examined the objects on the table, feeling an uncanny pull from them. One of the figurines caught my eye, a small figure that seemed to mirror my own form, though its expression was twisted and distorted, echoing the fear I felt echoing inside me. As I reached out to touch it, a sudden chill swept through the room, snuffing the orb's glow for a brief moment. A loud bang echoed from the door behind me, rattling the old wood as if something had slammed against it. I whipped around, fear gripping me tightly. The air felt thick with malevolence, and a low, dark laugh reverberated through the room, sending chills down my spine. "You think you can hide?" the voice sneered. "You are just a flicker in the dark." Feeling a surge of panic, I fumbled for the orb, nearly dropping it as I clutched it tightly. I took a step back toward the door. The laughter grew louder, mocking, relentless. With every passing second, the shadows crept in closer, stealing the warmth of the light. I had to find a way out before I was swallowed by the darkness. Just then, I noticed a large, tattered curtain draped along the far wall. It swayed slightly as if pushed by a breath of wind. Without thinking, I dashed toward it, hoping it would lead to another room, perhaps another chance to escape whatever hunted me. Tugging the curtain aside, I found an opening that led down a narrow staircase lined with crumbling stone. The smell of dampness filled my lungs, and I hesitated for a moment, unsure of what awaited me below. But the laughter grew louder, more hostile, and I plunged into the darkness below, the light of the orb flickering violently as I descended. The walls seemed to close in around me, and I could feel the shadows pooling at my feet, trying to snag me with every step. Once I reached the bottom, I found myself in a vast underground chamber. A heavy silence enveloped the space, broken only by the distant dripping of water echoing through the dark. The air was cold and stale, sending a shiver down my spine. I glanced around, squinting into the darkness, trying to find something, anything, that could keep me safe. The chamber was lined with stone columns, tall and imposing, like strange sentinels watching over me. Yet it was the center of the room that caught my eye. A dark pool rested there, its surface still and ominous, reflecting the dim light of my orb as if it were a window to another world. An overpowering sense of dread washed over me. I approached cautiously, feeling drawn to the pool despite the unease gnawing at my stomach. Strange visions flickered across its surface, images of myself entangled in darkness, despair pulling me down into the depths. Every fear I'd ever possessed danced across the water, vivid and raw. I stepped back, heart racing, feeling my breath quicken in my chest. But then I noticed something else. The edges of the pool seemed to shimmer, and a faint glow pulsed beneath the surface, almost like a heartbeat. The shadows around me began to swirl, angry and chaotic, reaching out toward the glimmering light. I could feel them closing in again, hungry for my fear, desperate to silence the light I carried. "No!" I shouted, raising the orb high once more. The warmth surged through me, and I felt a solid determination ignite deep within. I couldn't allow myself to be consumed. I wouldn't let the darkness win. I focused all my energy into the orb, letting its light explode outward like a sun breaking through a storm. The chamber lit up, casting long shadows on the walls, sending the dark hissing back into the corners. The pool glimmered under the illumination, the dark sheen of its surface now swirling with light. I could feel the presence pushing against me, the twisted shapes trying to claw their way toward the glow. As I stood there, my hand clutching the orb, the whispering shadows spoke again, though they sounded frantic now. "You cannot do this. This is our domain. Leave while you can." The words chilled my bones, but I couldn't back down. I stood firm, focused on the light, beckoning it to expand further, to push the shadows away for good. But then, something unexpected happened. From the depths of the pool, an inky tendril shot up, reaching out like a snake. It wrapped around my arm, the cold seeping in, attempting to drag me down. I yanked my arm free, but the darkness was relentless, pulling harder now, forcing me closer to the edge of the pool. "This is your fate," it howled, latching onto my ankle, wrestling me against my will. I could feel the cold spreading through me, sapping my strength. Panic surged through me as I fought against the darkness. Taking a deep breath, I channeled every ounce of defiance I had left. "I will not be taken," I screamed, thrusting the orb toward the tendril. The light flared bright, blinding in its intensity, and I felt heated strength radiate from it. The tendril recoiled with an anguished shriek, dissolving into shadows that scattered back into the edges. But the darkness was not finished. As the shadows retreated, a monstrous form began to rise from the pool, a swirling mass of anger and malice. Its features twisted and turned, grotesque and horrific, eyes glowing with a malevolent hunger. I stumbled back, feeling an overwhelming sense of dread wash over me. "Foolish child," it boomed, voice echoing like thunder. "You think you can defy me? I will consume everything you are." As it surged forward, I could feel the room tremble. The ground shook beneath me, stones cracking and splintering. Shadows clawed at my feet, eager to grip me again, but the light from the orb illuminated the chamber, pushing back the darkness that slithered around me. It was then that I realized I could fight back. This creature was born from my fears, my insecurities. If I could confront the source, I might truly be able to escape this nightmare. I focused on the aspects of myself I had hidden away, my strength, my hope, my will to overcome. I own my fears, I shouted, lifting the orb higher. You do not control me. The creature slowed, confusion crossing its terrible face. Its form flickered, shadows rippling like a disturbed pond. I pressed forward, feeling the ground stabilizing beneath my feet as the orb glowed brighter than ever before. With a ferocity I didn't know I possessed, I thrust the orb toward the beast, shouting, "You are nothing but a reflection of what I can overcome." The light erupted in a blinding wave, stronger than I had ever felt, engulfing the shadows entirely. The creature howled, a wretched cry echoing through the chamber, and in that moment, the shadows receded, retreating as if scorched by the purity of my light. I felt the energy wrap around me, and for the first time, I could see the darkness pulsing with fear. But even as the creature writhed in agony, shadows pooled desperately, trying to regroup, seeking a way back to their master. The air filled with tension as the room shook once more, but I wouldn't back down. I wouldn't allow them to take me again. Gathering my strength, I surged forward, determined to banish the darkness once and for all. "I am not afraid," I shouted, directing the orb's light toward the swirling mass, refusing to let it consume me. "You will not win." With every ounce of my will, I charged the light, feeling its brilliance radiate off of me. As the brilliant glow enveloped the creature finally, it let out a bone-chilling scream that echoed through the chamber. The very fabric of its being began to unravel, shadows dissipating into wisps of darkness that danced away in panic. The chamber filled with an overwhelming brightness, illuminating every corner as the light broke through the remnants of my fears. With one final surge, I pulled the darkness into the light, watching as it fractured, surrendering to the brilliance. But just when I thought it was over, a chilling realization washed over me. The echoes of that horrible laughter lingered still, whispering in hidden corners. I was not done yet. There were more shadows left to confront, more fears waiting to rise. With the light still burning at my side, I took a breath, bracing myself for the unknown. I would face whatever came next. I would not allow darkness to hold me captive again. With each step forward, I prepared to delve deeper into the abyss, ready to meet the terrifying truths that awaited, no matter how frightening they might be. With the light still burning at my side, I took a breath, bracing myself for the unknown. I would face whatever came next. I would not allow darkness to hold me captive again. Each step deeper into this haunted chamber felt more ominous than the last, as if the very walls were alive, breathing with the tension of dread and desperation. As I moved beyond the shattered remnants of the creature, the air grew heavy and thick, like a fog pressing in around me. Faint whispers lingered, curling around my thoughts, threatening to drag me back into despair. I clenched the orb tighter, its warmth grounding me even as I felt shadows flit just beyond the edge of my vision. They danced just out of reach, their forms flickering and shifting like smoke, teasing me from the corners, ready to pounce the moment my guard was down. I pressed on, determined. At the end of the chamber, I spotted an archway, framed in darkness. The shadows seemed to thicken around it, casting a foreboding presence that urged me to turn back. I hesitated for a moment, heart pounding in my chest, but I couldn't let fear win this time. I lifted the orb, casting its light into the darkened space. As the glow extended, I discovered walls of stone covered in strange, twisting symbols, pulsating softly like a heartbeat. With each pulse, the whispers became louder, overlapping in a chaotic crescendo, drowning out my thoughts. "Stay! You belong here," they taunted, seductive and dark, pulling at the edges of my mind. I took a step back, shaking my head, trying to resist their allure. This was the core of my fears, the very source of the darkness that had haunted me. Resolute, I stepped through the archway, into a circular chamber much larger than the last. Its center was dominated by a massive, gaping maw, like a living pit that pulsed with a shadowy light. The moment I crossed the threshold, ancient energy crackled in the air, wrapping around me like an invisible chain. Voices echoed from the depths of the pit, a chorus of sorrow and rage that chilled me to the bone. "You will never escape," they whispered, reverberating around me like a haunting refrain. Panic flared within me, but I remembered my determination and the power I had harnessed. I took a deep breath and aimed the orb at the pit, its light spilling into the darkness. As the glow spilled forth, the shadows recoiled, shrieking in an inhuman voice, a sound like nails on a chalkboard. "No! Do not take our light!" The voices screamed as they coiled and writhed, desperate to retreat. But the tendrils that gripped my heart still held strong, reminding me of the fears I had tucked away. I could feel them clawing at my mind, injecting poison into my thoughts, but I refused to let them tighten their hold. "Enough!" I shouted, feeling the power of the light surge through me. "I'm not my fears. I will not let you control me." My voice echoed in the chamber, and I raised the orb higher, feeding it with every ounce of strength I had. Suddenly, the pit trembled violently as darkness streamed upward, forming into a colossal shadow creature more terrifying than anything I had faced before. Its eyes burned like fiery coals, filled with rage, and its mouth stretched into an impossibly wide grin, revealing rows of jagged teeth. I could feel its anger pushing against my very soul, a wave of despair that threatened to topple me. "Foolish child," it hissed, a voice enveloping me in a chill that pierced right to my core. "You think you are free?" I felt the shadows tear at my feet, pulling me backward, grasping for me with frantic energy. The darkness clawed and pulled, desperate to drag me back into its depths, but my light grew brighter, a solid shield against the encroaching dread. "Back!" I screamed, pushing the orb toward the creature, letting its brilliance explode and radiate outwards. The shadows screamed and hissed, recoiling against the light, their forms breaking apart like mist in the sun. The creature howled in frustration, thrashing in the shadows, but it could not withstand the force of my will. I felt the fear fade, replaced by a fierce joy as I fought back against my own darkness. But just as I thought victory was mine, the creature lunged, its massive form surging toward me. I felt the ground shake violently under its weight, and a sense of dread washed over me. I couldn't let this be how it ended. I should have known this fight would be one last brutal test of my resolve. I had to dig deeper and trust in my strength. With a fierce cry, I thrust the orb with every ounce of power I possessed, a blinding light erupting into the chamber. The darkness shrieked as I felt the shadows around me shift and drop like a curtain fallen abruptly. Whispers of despair shattered into silence, the shadows crumbling like ash. My surroundings dissolved into a brilliant haze, and I focused on the creature, screaming my defiance. "I choose light. I choose life." Each word felt like thunder, echoing off the stones and shattering the remnants of the darkness as I released all my fears. And in that moment, the shadows detached from me, peeling away like layers of my own past. As the shadows vanished into the light, the creature dissolved into a wisp of smoke, and the finest shreds of its form fell away, leaving only the bright glow that pulsed at my core. In a final echo of fury, the chamber began to collapse around me. I stumbled backwards, feeling the gravitational force threaten to pull me down with it. The walls shook and splintered, pieces of stone and shadow-free falling away, revealing the glimmering brightness just beyond the archway. I knew I had to escape before the darkness returned to reclaim me. I dashed back the way I came, my heart racing faster with each step, the light still radiating from my grasp. The shadows tried to reach for me, pulling at my ankles, but I leapt past, fueled by the knowledge that I had fought my deepest fears and emerged victorious. Just as the last of the darkness crumpled to dust, light flooded the corridors, illuminating everything with an otherworldly glow. I burst through the final doorway, leaving the shadows behind. I gasped as I found myself outside, bathed in the soft glow of the moonlight. The cool night air felt like liberation washing over me, cleansing every ounce of fear and darkness that had once held me captive. I stood there, breathing deeply, the world now quiet around me. I had faced shadows that dwelled in my heart and defeated them. I smiled, feeling the weight lift from my shoulders, freedom coursing through me like a newfound lifeblood. As I took in the stars above, twinkling like the scattered pieces of my resolve, I knew this was just the beginning. The journey ahead would still be filled with challenges, but now I was armed with the light I had cultivated within. I would not forget the shadows, but they would never claim me again. Standing under the vast sky, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. Each star whispered of the journey yet to unfold, and I would face it all with courage. The darkness no longer held sway over me.